Well, hello there, and welcome to my mini arcade. Hey, it's Aaron or YYR, and several folks who watched my first video on the Qbert Replicade cabinet from New Wave Toys asked for an update post-patch. So, well, here's the update. I'm basically going to tell you what I think about how this thing all turned out. But to fully explain our strange journey, it's necessary to explain why I was so rough on this Qbert cabinet originally. And really, I can sum it up in the fact that Qbert is the mini arcade cabinet that I wanted most out of, all these that are being manufactured. And there's a lot, and there's multiple manufacturers, and there's all kinds of stuff, all kinds of great stuff being made. Like, for example, here we have on the outside, we have the Astro City Mini V and the Astro City Mini from Sega Toys, which are both multi-game cabinets that have a whole bunch of classic Japanese-made games. Up here from Numbskull, we have the Quarter Arcades line, Ms. Pac-Man and Bubble Bobble. And down here you have actually my personal favorite, Taito's Egret 2 Mini, which has an amazing collection of classic Japanese games from Taito, including Bubble Bobble. Now, why do I have Bubble Bobble running in two places? I could just say Bubble Bobble is fantastic, which it is, but the real reason is I want to illustrate the pixel scaling issue which plagued the Qbert cab when it was originally released. So here I'll just show you quickly, if I close up on the screen, the beautiful bright screen of the Egret 2 Mini, you can see that this has, first of all, it's a pretty high resolution and bright screen, but also you can see that, it looks the way it should, really. The text looks uniform, the sprites look fine, the animation looks smooth, really nothing doing as far as, problems or issues. Now, unfortunately, now I'm going to show you the Quarter Arcades version, and you can already see, what's up with this text. Why do those zeros look so weird? It's because unfortunately, the Numbskull Bubble Bobble has the same issue that the Qbert had, and that is the pixel scaling is completely wrong, and there's no anti-aliasing on the graphics. So, yeah, you can see, again, the text not being uniform is a dead giveaway, but also you see the shimmering effect when the characters move. You see just this weird blockiness on the graphics, and, things do not look authentic. They don't look the way that they used to look in the original game. So that's really unfortunate. Back in late 2021, Numbskull told me that their customer support told me that they would be they're aware of the issue and that they would be addressing it in 2023, but I have contacted their customer support since then, and they have kind of been quiet. So I'm hoping that, if I make a stink about it, maybe they will also fix their issue the way that New Wave did with Qbert, because, well, New Wave has this is one of my favorite New Wave products, actually. They're amazing at what they do best, and what they do best is the replicas. I mean, this really does look like the change machine that was in, like, practically every arcade ever. Yeah. And on the back is a bunch of USB ports. In fact, that is what is powering all of this stuff right now. It's pretty cool. You can plug like 6 things into it at a time, and it looks amazing. And it's actually the same 1/6 scale as the Replicade cabinets. So anyway, I'll just grab this so we can take a closer look at it. So if we're now just looking at the Q*bert, this, by the way, is the Warren Davis edition that they put out first. It is meant to not be a replica of the mass-produced Q*bert, but instead of Warren Davis, who was the programmer, of his personal Q*bert cabinet. It's a prototype. The side art is generic, but it is reproduced here as you know, a faithful reproduction of the side art on his cabinet. This art is mostly final, but there were a few subtle changes between this and the final art they used. And this early marquee shows they really didn't quite know what to call the game at first. They really were just going to call it that. But how do you pronounce that? That's the problem. So the story of how the game was actually named is one of the many interesting anecdotes in Warren Davis's recent book, Creating Q*bert. It's an excellent read. I definitely recommend it. Definitely check that out if you want the full story. So, well, if we're looking at the screen now, I hope that the video, see, now you can see the text is uniform, unlike before, which is great. And you can see that the animation when Q*bert is moving vertically is now perfectly smooth. This is what happens when you apply the patch that New Wave Toys put out. Link is in the description. And yeah, I absolutely recommend that if you got the Q*bert. And oh, and here's the other way you can tell. If you look at the edges of the cubes, they are now uniform. They are they look good. They did not look good before. They looked all kinds of weird and distorted and jagged, and you can see the you know, you can see it both in my original video, and now look at this uniform text. It's a thing of beauty. Yeah, you can see in the original video and on the screenshots that I have on my Amazon review, which is also linked in the description. And yeah, this the control panel, including the joystick, it's pretty much all entirely to scale, which is good and bad. I'll explain that later, but not too much later. This video isn't going to be that long. But anyway, as far as, you know, the rest of the cabinet, I've talked about you know, how the pixel scaling is good now, but really the screen, it's a good quality screen. The viewing angles on it are good. It's not like the the numbskull where if you're not looking at it straight on, you can't see anything. It's got good viewing angles. It's got the sound works great. I have it actually turned very low at the moment on purpose, but there we go. That's a little louder. And the other thing, if I actually press this button here, I'll jump into the menu. The menu interface is a little bit weird. You actually use the buttons to move and the joystick to select. I had turned off the knocker because, I don't know, I guess the sound gets a little tiring after a while, but it is really adorable. The sound that you hear when a character falls off the pyramid. That physical click that you heard is actually a replica of something that existed in the original cabinet, which was a pinball knocker. A fantastic idea. Gottlieb was a pinball company, and yeah, there was a pinball knocker in there to give that extra oomph. effect when a character left the pyramid and jumped to their doom, including you. So that was a really cool effect, and it's really neat that they put a little tiny mini knocker in there. It's just a neat little touch. And there are lots of neat little touches, like if you turn it around, you get this little lock on the back. It's pretty adorable. You've got an HDMI out port on there also, although mine didn't seem to work, but I don't really care because I don't use it. Yeah, see? You hit a knocker even if you're the one that's falling off. The exterior, like the materials, are really, really great. I was impressed with the Quarter Arcades line also. As far as the materials, everything feels very authentic, but the decals on here feel super nice. And another thing I'll mention is this cabinet actually contains 2 games, the original arcade Q*bert as well as the prototype version that was never released, that Warren Davis actually has running by default in his cabinet, called Faster, Harder, More Challenging Q*bert, and it absolutely lives up to its name. It's a much more difficult version of the game. It's definitely worth checking out if you thought Q*bert was a little on the easy side. I'm one of those people. I do think it is easier than other arcade games of its day. I have lasted over half an hour on 1/4 before. I cannot do that with the Faster, Harder, More Challenging version. I'm lucky to last 5 minutes. So it makes several changes to the rules of the game that are all, like, the flying discs now move. The difficulty ramps up much more quickly. It's just a absolutely much more challenging version of the game, worth having, worth playing. If you check out that book I mentioned earlier, Creating Q*bert by Warren Davis, the programmer, he does mention that this is his favorite version of the game. So definitely check that out. Now, my one remaining negative, in my opinion, about this cabinet is the joystick itself. So, you know, the original joystick was on the original arcade game, was a 4-way gated joystick that was rotated 45 degrees so that it would only move diagonally. This lever here does not have any gate in it of any kind. So you can just kind of move it in any direction, up, down, left, right, and you don't really feel anything restricting you at all. I mean, it kind of feels nice, but it makes gameplay a little bit more difficult because you can move it in any direction. So it's a little frustrating when, you know, you push the lever and maybe not exactly the direction that you meant to go, and you would not have had that problem on the original arcade game, and you fall to your doom, or, you know, you don't wind up in the spot where you intended. So you do have to be a little mindful of exactly which direction you're moving, and, you know, make sure you're using the lever straight on. If you get a little out of whack, you can have that problem. So yeah, the control is not perfect, but almost everything else about this cabinet is. It's a really nice item to have, and if you're a big fan of Q*bert, I absolutely recommend it. Unfortunately, it recently did sell out. Well, I mean, unfortunately for us, maybe not unfortunately for New Wave, but you can still find them new on a few secondhand websites, and I mean, there's always the auction and other secondhand sites. I would say it's definitely worth the original asking price of $150, but I would probably pay a little bit more for it if I felt I really needed to have it. So I'll also mention here I did get a second Replicade cab, this one here, 1942, which is actually still in stock on New Wave's site and also on Amazon. It says 1942, and it is, but this cabinet also has 2 games in it. If I access the menu here, you can see it also contains the far superior 1943, which is a true classic in the shoot-'em-up genre. I spent many an hour playing this on the original hardware. Once again, you know, this is a pretty realistic scale cabinet. The screen, which is nice and bright, does not have the pixel scaling issue that the Q*bert shipped with. It's been perfect the whole time. Like the Q*bert screen, it's got good viewing angles. It's bright, it's clear, it's a nice screen. The marquee lights up. The Q*bert does that too. Probably all of them do. And you've got, this is a replica of a cabinet, a rare cabinet, referred to as the Lowboy 1942 cabinet. And yeah, the wood grain paneling, it feels very nice. The decal feels like a decal. It the sound system in here, actually, I really like the sound of it. It's got good bass. It sounds great. And yeah, it's all in all a very nice replica. But like the Q*bert, I have one big problem with it, and that's the control panel. Once again, you have it to scale. Now, it's important to note that, you know, everything here is to scale, including the controls. Different manufacturers approach this issue differently. For example, over here, you've got, with the Astro City and also the Egret 2, the cabinet is to scale for the most part, but the control panel is not. They intentionally make the controls much bigger than the scale in order to improve the playability of the game that you're playing on it. So, you know, you don't have the same kinds of issues. You get, you know, it's big enough that you can make it gated, you can make it micro-switched, you can do all that stuff with it, and it plays very well. And then, you know, you have the Quarter Arcades line, which uses a 1/4 scale as opposed to a 1/6 scale. So even though the controls are to scale, because the scale is bigger, you know, you have less of an issue with the controls themselves. Also, what's really nice about what Numbskull did is they gate and micro-switch the joystick. So for example, this one can only move in 4 directions. You can't move diagonal. And the Bubble Bobble joysticks only move left and right. You physically cannot push the lever up and down or diagonally. So once again, if you're looking at the 1942 cab, once again, not only is it to scale, but also it is not gated and it is not micro-switched. So you can move this thing in a circle. You can move it in any direction whatsoever, but the game only processes 8 directions. So you're going to have some issues with precision where, you know, you're pushing it maybe not quite all the way diagonal, and so the game's not going to get your diagonal input. And I mean, I'm simplifying things a lot there, but it makes the game much more difficult to play. But the bigger problem than the lever is this fire button. It's tiny. It's not micro-switched, so it feels mushy. And the size and the shape of it makes it, you know, like, yeah, if you're just pressing it a few times, you're fine. But think about what kind of game this is. It's a game where you are constantly pressing the fire button. And it's not a short game either. So you're mashing the fire button over and over again for levels at a time. After about 5 to 10 minutes of that, my finger's already hurting. It stinks. And it's a shame, too, because this thing is perfect except for the built-in controls. Now, what's worth mentioning is that if you buy this 1942 mini cabinet, it not only comes with the cabinet itself, including the 2 games, but they also throw in the box this, a 1943 styled mini joystick. And this is possibly the best thing in the box, if you ask me, because first of all, it's small. I mean, you can see my hand, and I may have a decent big-sized hand, but you can see this is a very, very small stick. That being said, if you compare it to the control panel, you can see that both the lever and the buttons are larger than what is built into the unit. The other thing you will notice is it's micro-switched, and it is gated. It moves in only the 8 directions that the game processes. The buttons are also micro-switched, and they feel very satisfying to press. This literally fixes every issue with the built-in controls. And you can connect it to one of the USB ports in the back of the game and go. Would it be better if these controls were built into the cabinet? Yes, absolutely. But you can play it well if you plug this thing in. And another thing to note, this plugs into your computer too. So if you want to run it with an emulator, or with a simple game that only requires 2 buttons, you absolutely can do that, and it will play great. So yeah, this is really cool. And also they sell them separately for $20. So I absolutely definitely recommend this. It's just, I understand that they really wanted to keep the scale correct, but come on, would it have really killed you to put these superior controls on that panel instead of the tiny, mushy, cruddy ones? Like, come on. I'm pretty sure you can actually also use this with the Q*bert, although, you'll still be able to move in the 4 cardinal directions, which Q*bert would not allow. So it's not perfect, but, it's an option. And I'm glad that they offer it, I really am. So all in all, the built-in controls are a shame. But, they don't completely cripple the Q*bert. Q*bert is still perfectly playable with that joystick. I definitely would not recommend that you play 1942 or 3 with the built-in controls. Plug in the joystick. That's maybe why they include it in the box. I mean, I hate plugging stuff in or having to plug stuff in. I refuse to buy a new Mac because they need dongles for everything. Mac laptop, I mean. Yeah, I hate having to lug stuff with me. But, yeah, other than that, it's great. It's a big other than that, though. It really is. So that's why I gave this 3 stars out of 5 on Amazon. But right now, the price is $80 for this. They're really trying to blow them out the door. So I would say it's worth it for $80, especially considering that it comes with the stick. So, anywho, I hope you enjoyed this detailed look at the 2 Replicade cabinets with bubble bobble noises playing in the background. And, yeah, have fun with them.